Hello everyone, and it's time to take a look at the Shadow slash Assassin changes for 3.0. Now, this is the class, I have to be honest, I was most worried about looking at the changes for 3.0. This is the class that is right now the most fun class in the game, I would say. It's the most fun, certainly the most fun of all the melee classes right now. It has a good ton of mobility. It has a nice burst damage. We're talking about Madness skill tree here. It's got nice burst damage. It's got the dots, of course, and it's got that kind of on-demand. There's never really any downtime with Madness, and that's one of the great things about it. There's always something that's going to be causing some really nice damage for you in Madness. You know, other classes maybe have that little bit of downtime. Madness doesn't, and Madness has that kind of burst window where they're just incredibly good at damage, and that window is there's no real, we're never really out of that window. We are out of it a little bit while we wait for Crushing Darkness to come off cooldown, where we're waiting for our dots to refresh, or our dot ticks to wear off, but now, of course, we still have plenty of things to do. We've got our Bloodletting proc, we've got our Thrash with the thing that makes our crits, our melee attacks, extra crit, extra chance to crit. We use Thrash with that, pretty decent again. So we're always a pretty fun class to play. It really is an awesome class to play. It's fun to solo. Soloing heroics with it is fantastic because you just got so much damage and it's so fun right now. It is a bit awkward because we are the OP spec right now. We're one of those specs that's just so overpowered. So the fear is that we're going to get nerfed into the ground. Now we don't know what the damage numbers are going to be in 3.0 yet. Don't know. Probably won't know until it's released really, and we can do extensive testing on the damage numbers. We don't know how the damage squish is going to affect us right away, so we don't know that. We just don't know right away, but it is a fun class to play, and it's a spec that I am going to play more often in 3.0. I've decided that my main DPS is going to be a Shadow. I've decided that. I'm going to play Republic, and I'm going to go a Force and Balance Shadow, or whatever the hell it's called now. What's it called now? It is called Serenity now. Well, that's easier to say at least. Thanks BioWare for that. The Assassin one is now called Hatred. So let's talk about some of the changes. We'll start with Deception. Deception is a waste of time as far as PvE is concerned. PvP, it's pretty awesome. Deception is so boring. It is so boring right now. They have been given, what have they been granted? They have been granted a new passive ability. They've also have a critical damage bonus. What is it? They're granted a new passive that increases critical chance and critical damage bonus of Lacerate to help them in AoE, which they really need. They really need AoE. I don't know how good this is going to be, but currently Deception is useless for anything other than PvP. It's not fun to level with. I tried leveling as a Infiltration Shadow, and it was boring as hell. I ended up just going Force and Balance halfway through leveling because it was so much better. You're also getting another passive ability that increases the damage dealt by Lacerate, Voltic Slash, and Assassinate. Again, it's to boost their melee damage. So of course, they do have a new active ability called Ball Lightning, which doesn't make any sense. Why can't they just call it Lightning Ball? I don't know. Basically replaces Shock. I don't know if it's going to do anything. That's all it says. Strikes the target with a ball of lightning for energy damage. Places Shock. Standard weak targets are stunned for 3 seconds. So that's what Shock did, basically. You also get Surging Charge, which has been changed. So it can trigger off of what? Trigger off melee attacks. Changed so it normally triggers off melee attacks. Prevents discharge from unintentionally generating and instantly consuming a stack of static charge when used. It's a skill that allows Shock and now Ball Lightning to generate a static charge. Oh, boring. Boring. It's so boring to read that, to be honest with you. Let's get to the good one. I'm not going to cover the tank one, I should point out as well, because I've never played a tank, so I don't really know about the tank, to be honest. We are getting Depredating Volts, which is just a replacement for Force Lightning. Okay, so don't know if it's going to be any good. What else are you getting for the Assassin? You're getting a new passive that increases shield absorption by 30% when Recklessness is used. That's another cooldown, I guess. It's increasing the damage done by Lacerate, and targets are having their accuracy reduced. So yeah, interesting. I don't really know. Can't really comment on that. So what about Hatred, or Madness as it was previously known? We're getting a new passive. Again, Deathfield is going to spread our Discharge and Creeping Terror to unaffected targets that it damages, as long as the target damages are affected by the periodic effects. So what's happening here is it's just another spreading the dot ability. Again, all the other dot classes are getting this. The Vengeance Guardian is getting something similar, and the Virulence Sniper is getting something. Virulence was lethality, of course. So each class is getting an ability to spread their dots out, which again means that we're going to be fighting multiple enemies again. Maybe multiple bosses. We have fought a few council type bosses. We fought the Dread Guards, we fought the Dread Council, we fought the Cartel Warlords. Maybe it'll be something like that in 3.0, so we can, if they're grouped together, we can spread our dots. It's going to be better on Trash for us as well, because we can just get those two, get our two dots up, get our Discharge, Creeping Terror up, and then Deathfield. Deathfield looks as if it's still going to do the same thing as it did before, but it is also going to spread our dots as well. So Deathfield is going to spread our dots. Again, dot spreading and multi-dotting is being made easier. Again, this is a good quality of life change, because again, the way we multi-dotted before was we'd have to run around like a crazy person and just throw our Discharge on, because it was the only one without a cooldown, because Creeping Terror has a cooldown, and so does Crushing Darkness. So speaking of Crushing Darkness, we're getting a new ability called Demolish, which essentially replaces Crushing Darkness. So it's kind of the same as Crushing Darkness. It does make the target vulnerable for 45 seconds though, which increases the damage taken from force attacks by 5%. So I guess we're going to be using Lightning and Shock. This is a little bit disappointing, because the thing I liked about Hatred, or Madness as it was called, was the ability, the fact that we were a DPS class with no channeled abilities. We had no channeled abilities and no cast abilities if we played it right, because of course Crushing Darkness had no cast time if we waited for the proc. Again, it was a target that was affected by your Discharge. If you hit them with a melee attack, you got a Crushing Darkness, which cost no force and had no cast time. So I guess I like that. I really like that, the fact that we had no channeled abilities. Now we're getting a channeled ability, I guess, because increasing the damage taken from force attacks. Our two main force attacks are, of course, Lightning and Shock. Our two main force attacks. So we're going to be using them. Probably using Lightning if you have to stand still, Shock if you have to move. It will increase the damage by 5%. It would be nice to see if this stacks with the other buff that increases our melee damage, because the in-between phase, when we were waiting for our dots to come off, we were using melee attacks only. That was what we used. Our priority was always, if Bloodletting was proccing or the target had low health, it was Assassinate. If not, it was Thrash. So yeah, I mean, that was the other thing. That was the thing that we used. Will this change our rotation? We'll have to see. You'll have to see what the damage numbers are doing, and again, it'll depend on your surge and how much crit you have, I guess. So in low gear, we'll probably be doing Lightning, which is kind of a shame, because we'll be standing still for a few seconds, which I didn't like. I like the mobility of the Assassin. The other thing we get is another dot called Leeching Strike. It seems like a melee attack. It's called Strike. So it saps the life away from the enemy, deals weapon damage, and it heals you for 50%. No, it doesn't. It's not an extra dot, actually. It says it saps life away from the enemy, so I assume that It's just another heal. They haven't said whether they're going to take the heal away from, what is it? Deathfield. Missing Deathfield. Deathfield, of course. Love that ability, Deathfield. It is, of course, a taunt as a DPS. There is a saying, Deathfield taunts. Yeah, because, you know, you can pull aggro off any tank with Deathfield right now. So what utilities are we getting? New utilities. We're getting Audacity. Reduces the cooldown of Overload by 2.5 seconds. Overload is, of course, pretty useless, to be honest with you. And Recklessness gets an additional charge. So you're probably going to take that to get 3 charges of Recklessness instead of 2. If you don't know what Recklessness does, Recklessness increases your critical chance by, I think it's 75%. So your next 2 abilities, I think it's your next 2 force abilities, and it might be melee in the assassin's case. I don't remember. I know in terms of the sorcerer, it's your next 2 force abilities have a 75% chance to crit, and if they do crit, it consumes a charge, and you get 2 charges essentially of this. So again, we're getting Shroud of Madness. Activating Force Cloak grants us 2 seconds of Force Shroud. Force Shroud's a pretty nice defensive cooldown, so Shroud of Madness is going to be a defensive cooldown. Again, well, Cloak is going to be a defensive cooldown. Cloak is, of course, when we stealth out, so we're going to get a few seconds of Force Shroud. That's going to be more useful in PvP than PvE. I mean, again, it's a nice extra defensive cooldown. We're also getting Dark Stability, which means while our deflection is active, we're immune to all incapacitating effects, like all the stuns, sleeps, and lifts. We're immune to all of them. Again, this is a PvP thing. Probably going to be used more in PvP. Situational in PvE. If we know we're going to get stunned by something, then, you know, maybe we could use that. But PvE, it's going to be situational at best. So if you know something is going to stun you, if a boss is going to stun you, getting that immunity to stuns, just hit deflection and you'll get the immunity. So that will be situational at best, I would say. Situational. Again, Audacity you're going to take. The one thing I would really have liked in this class is Overload to be changed. I would like to see maybe a utility that removes the knockback effect of Overload but increases its damage. You know, maybe sort of 50% damage increase but gets rid of the knockback. That way it's an extra AoE for us, because Overload right now is a pointless AoE. The problem with it is that it knocks enemies back, so it is absolutely useless for clearing trash. In fact, it's a hindrance to most assassin classes. You will be hated. The amount of times you've been doing Kuat Drive Yards as a sorcerer or as an agent, and you fire out your Force Lightning, or you've got your Orbital Strike out, and then of course what happens is an assassin comes along and uses their Overload because they think that's their AoE, and pushes all the mobs out of your agent and sorcerer's effects, pissing them off. You're only gonna, it's a one-way ticket to ignore lists, really, using that ability, Overload. So I would like to have seen it changed. I think a change to Overload, get rid of its knockback, increase its damage. Then it would be a strategic choice for PvP. Do you want the extra damage or do you want the knockback? You know, you'd have a choice there. That's what the utility system should be about, in my opinion, is giving you some genuine choice and some change the way the class plays slightly, at least. I mean, it would be quite a minor change, but it would be nice to have had the choice. I mean, for PvP, sometimes you want the knockback in PvP if there's a, you know, a marauder who's munching on you and you just want to get rid of them, or you want to push someone off the edge. If you're doing Void Star or Hutball, if you're pushing them into the fire, for example. So you would want, maybe not take that utility in PvP. Maybe you'd take it just to gain extra damage. But PvE, you would definitely take it, I would think. To get rid of that on Overload would be nice. It's nice that they've added a little bit more AoE to the Deception tree. At least the Deception discipline, at least, because that was where it lacked, really. It had nothing, essentially. Using your, what was it, your spin attack thing, the problem with it is that it just cost too much force and didn't do enough damage. At least in Madness, it procced your lightsaber charge. proc your lightning charge at least, so it was pretty useful, and you had Death Field as an AoE as well. So Madness is probably still going to be ahead because of the dot spreading that's going to occur now with Death Field. So when you're fighting multiple enemies, you're just going to get your 2 dots up, and then you're going to get your Death Field up, and then it'll spread dots to all of them. Pretty nice AoE, pretty nice, and then you're just going to use your spinning slash thing. I can't remember what it's called actually. I think it's, is it Lacerate or Thrash? I can't never remember what those two are called. I haven't played my assassin. I've been playing a Shadow, to be honest, throughout this. The footage you'll be looking at will be Shadow footage for this video, actually, because we're going to use our Shadow as a main, but I have done the Assassin. I've been an Assassin for longer, that's why I use the Assassin terminology for this, but the same applies to the Shadow. So we get a new melee attack, and we're getting the extra force damage, basically, for the Madness, or Hatred Tree as it's now known. So that is all for this video, so thank you for joining me, and hopefully our damage won't get nerfed. Please don't nerf our damage. I don't really care, to be honest, if the damage gets nerfed. I play a class based on how fun it is to play, not how much damage it does. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you soon, and goodbye.